This is verse 2, sorry, I beg your pardon. This is chapter 2, verse 213. Mankind is a single nation. So Allah raised prophets as bearers of good news and as warners, and He revealed with them the book with the truth, that it might judge between people concerning that in which they differed. And none but the very people who were given it differed about it after clear arguments had come to them, envying one another. So Allah has guided by His will those who believe to the truth about which they differ, and Allah guides whom He pleases to the right path. O mankind, surely we have created you from a single male and a single female, and made you into tribes and families that you may know each other. Surely the noblest of you with Allah is the most dutiful of you. Surely Allah is knowing and aware. Last week I mentioned to you the fact that sin and injustice and evil started with the very creation. And the question also arose at the same time about what should one do. Should it be opposed by force, or should it be just allowed to happen? At that time, of course, there was only one family, there were only two brothers when this happened. But later on, as humanity spread and moved, because as we know from research, and this is not religious research, but this is genetic and biological, archaeological and historic research, we know that humanity had one ancestral couple. And people say that humanity started in Ethiopia, and from there they spread, settling various places. And what happened was that people started to form clans and tribes. Your brother does something wrong, steals something from someone. So what do? Do you side with your brother, or do you side with the people whose property your brother has stolen? And of course, as human beings, people would side with their own brother, although he was wrong and he was unjust. And God made this comment when people said, Quraysh are superior to so and so, and this one is superior to that one. The Arab is superior to the Ajami being non-Arab. And then the Holy Prophet said that no one is superior to another person except in his deeds. And this is what the Holy Quran says, that you are made into families and tribes and so on, not that you fight each other, not that you say, I'm a Chaudhary or I'm an Arai and I am this or I am that, and that makes me superior, but simply so that you may know who belongs to what family. And as you would know, this has become even more important with the spread of genetic technology and medicine and so on. If you want a transplant, whatever it might be, then the first people that they look to are your close relatives, and they spread out from there, because you're more likely to find a match or a kidney or whatever it is among your family than among the general population. So God says, the fact that humanity was divided into these families and tribes and so on, this is the result either of a biological process of procreation or the result of man's endeavor in that they set out. If there's a drought, a part of the tribe stays in one place, one part decides that they're going to go and try their luck somewhere else. And they become two tribes, one established in one place, another one established in another place. But these divisions are of necessity, of which we are an example. We migrated from our own countries, or our parents migrated from their own countries, India or Pakistan or South America or West Indies, wherever it might be, and came to live in the UK. And we established ourselves here. So these things happen out of economic necessity. They happen for other reasons. But it doesn't mean to say that those who are left behind are inferior, or those who left are inferior. These are just things that happen. But people made belonging to a family or a group a matter of pride. And we have this. In all countries we have this. In the UK, you find jokes about the Irish, that they're not so clever and so on. In America, you find jokes about the Polish, that they're not so clever and so on. In India and Pakistan, you find jokes about the Sikhs, that they're not so clever and so on. So we make this association or this belonging to a community either a means of saying that they are somehow inferior or that we are somehow superior. I belong to the Quraysh. Well, my answer to that is, so did Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl and Abu Sufyan, Holy Prophet's enemies, who tried to destroy Islam, who kept attacking Medina, they belonged to Quraysh. Were they then superior? No. And God says that the whole of mankind is one single nation. We created one single nation. There was no division in Islam, but divisions arose because of greed. Because one family or one tribe trying to take advantage of others to better themselves, to grab more resources. And there are many examples. Muslims were settled in Medina and they were short of water, and there was this well in which there was a lot of water, and that was owned by a Jew, and he would refuse to sell that water to Muslims. So the Holy Prophet then made an appeal, and I think it was Hazrat Usman Razillah Ta'ala Anhu who went to this man and said, how much will you charge for that well? And he mentioned some outlandish sum. And Hazrat Usman said, well, there you are, paid him cash and bought it. I give that as an example of how when people are divided into different groupings, rather than use them merely as a means of recognition, like some people do in Pakistan. So-and-so Lahori, he comes from Lahore. So-and-so Sialkoti, he comes from Sialkot, and so on. So-and-so Multani. But they start to use these associations as a means of somehow damaging one community or unfair advantage or benefit for their own family or their own community. If you look at the First World War, what was it? It was a fight within a family. All the people fighting were cousins. I mean, strictly speaking, the current British royal family, they're Germans. They're not Anglo-Saxons, they're not English, they're Germans. So it was different branches of the same family who'd settled in different places, and by the use of force, they were trying to gain some advantage for the piece of land where they live. But God doesn't divide people into Welsh and English and Scottish and German and French. God says you're all one. And this is the thing, that if you look back, then you find that many of the wars of the olden days are between families. In India, for example, you had loads of wars when one king died and his sons ended up fighting each other to decide who's going to become the next king. Or, if you went further than that, perhaps you went to war on the tribe next door. Why? Because they followed a different God. But in Islam, there is no such distinction. God says, I created a single nation. Wherever they went to settle after creation, after they migrated from Ethiopia, wherever they went, I sent them a messenger to guide them to the right path. I didn't distinguish between any of them. I didn't say humanity was created in Ethiopia, so I'll only send my messengers, my Anbiya, my messengers, my prophets, only to Ethiopia, or to India, or to China, or to some other place. He said, wherever you went, I sent you guidance. I didn't deprive any of you. I regard you all as the same and all as being equal. As the Holy Prophet said, the only superiority is in your deeds, how good you are. And until recently, there was no concept of nation. This is an extremely dangerous theory that came up in the West, which was that people living in this particular land have some particular allegiance to that piece of land. They are English, they are Scottish, they are French, they are Chinese, whatever. And they have some kind of overriding loyalty to that piece of earth. And I sometimes ask people, here is a line that is drawn. Here is country A, here is country B. Everyone who lives to the left-hand side of that line is intensely loyal to that piece of land. This is my country. They're not loyal to any principle, they're not loyal to any ideal. Just that piece of land, this is my piece of land. I want to possess it. It's just like if you have a house, you don't want a stranger living in it. Now, the same thing applies to people who live on the right-hand side of that line. But if you do move that line to the right or to the left, suddenly their loyalty changes, and if you move the line to the left, then the country to the right, the people to the right are suddenly just as fanatically loyal to that little bit of extra piece of earth that they have. And that is the result of nationalism. Before nationalism raised its ugly head, in whatever way they were united, all the Muslims were united. The Khalifa, based in Turkey most recently, was the head of state for all Muslims. He directly ruled things like Syria and Lebanon, what is now Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. That was his direct rule. Technically, as I said last week, wherever you were, if you were a Muslim ruler, he was your head of state, you ruled in his name. It didn't matter how mighty, how great you were. But what happened? People say there are all these problems in the Arab world and this and that and so on, but let us see what happened. A direct consequence of the First World War was this, that the British said to the Arabs, you are Arabs, you rule the holy places, you are superior because the Holy Prophet Muhammad came to you. Look at those Turks. The Holy Quran is in Arabic and the Turks are ruling you. You are their subjects. Now in Islam, there is no such thing. And these tribes in Arabia, Saudi Arabia as it is called now, they rose up and they fought their own brothers. And the result of all the killing and lawlessness in that area is the result of how these powers behaved at the end of First World War. A place that was one country was divided up between the British and the French. Syria became one country, one prince, one chief of one tribe ruled Syria with British protection. Lebanon, same thing happened there. Palestine, because that was the Holy Land for the British, being Christians, they took control of that area themselves. And Jordan and Egypt and so on and so forth. It was all carved up, divided up amongst the chiefs of different tribes that joined the British to fight the Turks. The most dangerous theory that everyone adheres to these days is nationalism. Because that is what makes you fanatically loyal to a piece of land, not to any principle. And you say, I'm going to defend this with my life. It is better that you defend a principle with your life rather than a piece of earth. This is why the Holy Quran says over and over again, mankind is one nation, mankind is one nation, mankind is one nation. In Islam there are no French, no Germans, no Americans, no Canadians, no Brazilians, no Indians, no Bangladeshis. All humanity is one and should live as one nation and one people. Personally, I'm against all these boundaries and countries and so on and so forth. Can you imagine if all national boundaries were abolished and we became one world, how much money that is wasted on armies and air forces and navies and Trident missiles? Trillions of dollars and pounds would be saved. And those trillions could be spent on research, on providing clean water to parts of Africa that don't have it, to providing education to people. They can be spent to eliminating extremism. But that will only happen if we go back to the idea that the whole of mankind is one. And it is not to divide itself into little groups to try and gain some advantage over the person living in the next group. You'd be surprised to know that if you went to Bangladesh, there are parts of India inside Bangladesh. and there are parts of Bangladesh inside India. So if you're traveling, if you're Bangladeshi, you could go to an Indian, Bangladeshi part in India, cross over, go to India, then cross over, go to Bangladesh proper, then cross over, go to a bit of India in Bangladesh. How nonsensical is that? There are villages where the border passes down the street. Houses on the right are in one country, houses in the left, on the left are in a different country. How nonsensical is that? And Islam is against that, because what it does is creates enmity between people. Islam is concerned with people. Islam is not concerned with territory. Islam is not concerned with riches. Islam is concerned with your moral character. This is why the Holy Prophet said, Arab has no superiority over the non-Arab, or non-Arab over the Arab. Human beings, if they are superior to one another in anything, it is only their moral character that makes them superior or inferior. And if we didn't have this division, if we were to abide by this teaching of the Holy Quran, that families or tribes are merely a means of recognition, and maybe if you need a kidney transplant, knowing who to go to, which could be a bad thing, I guess. If you have to give your kidney up for someone, you may not be too pleased about it, the fact that you can be recognized, but there we are. So as long as we cling to this idea of nationalism and protecting territory, you will have war, whether just or unjust. Why is it that EU is now trying to become one political and economic unit? Why is it that the whole of North America, Canada, United States and Mexico are now trying to create one single economic and perhaps in the future political unit? They're all moving towards this concept that the Quran put forward 1500 years ago, that all humanity is one single nation. Next week, hopefully, having set the historical background to why conflict and wars take place, I will deal directly with what is a just war and what is not a just war.